Good evening and welcome to our DCC meeting. If we could go around the table and introduce ourselves. I'm Linda Lukowski of Triton School Committee.
Brian Forget, Superintendent of Triton.
Kyle Warren, Director of Finance and Operations with Triton.
Hi, Neil Harrington, the Town Manager in Salisbury.
And Paul Louise, Triton School Committee.
Christine Nealon, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Sherry David, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Larry White, Chairman, Raleigh Finance Committee.
Chuck DeKeesian, Salisbury Board of Selectmen.
Michael Colburn, Salisbury Board of Selectmen.
Ronnie Ray Parrott, Salisbury Select Board.
Patrick Heffernan, Newbury Finance Committee.
Richard Keys, Newbury Finance Committee.
Narissa Wallen, School Committee.
Paul Mann, School Committee.
Leslie Matthews, Newbury Select Board.
Erin Berger, Triton School Committee from Salisbury.
Caitlin Hunter, School Committee.
Okay. In the papers you have in front of you, we have meeting notes. We have the notes from the October 26th meeting. No formal vote is needed. These are notes and not official minutes, but does anyone here have any comments or clarifications they would like to make from the notes? Seeing none, we have a general update.
Linda, do you want to do Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, yes, you're correct. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Preoccupied with the microphone. And now we're going to have general updates. Superintendent Brian Forget will update on the progress of the school year this far.
So I don't have a lot to report to you. Obviously, we have a big agenda item. Every time we come together in January, we start to talk about the budget. So we continue to have a great year. We continue to try and keep the focus on students and learning and teachers. Obviously, at this time of year, and particularly this year, it has the discussions have turned to the budget, and obviously everyone's a little on edge as we have these discussions. It's hard to have these discussions publicly and keep all of that in isolation and out of the classrooms, if you will, as far as the way it's felt. So one update, since we are in Salisbury, I can alert you to the fact that we are beginning interviews on Monday for the new Salisbury Elementary School principal. We have a panel of parents. There are 7 parents. There's a panel of 10 staff and a panel of 7 administrators. And each candidate will spend 3 hours interviewing for an hour with each of those panels on Monday. And then we'll continue that process with a second round and on-site visits and such. I should also alert to you, I believe we mentioned this last time, but Kyle Warren, as we had talked about last month, is leaving at the end of February. We have had a search open, and so I'm happy to report, without a name or details yet, happy to report to you that I will be bringing a candidate next Wednesday to the school committee. There was not a strong, this has been a topic of discussion, there are not a lot of people that want Kyle's job or any of the Kyles in other districts. So it's a tough position to fill, but we got a great candidate, thrilled to welcome him on board. More details will follow next Wednesday after that information is public. So. As always, we put this item on the agenda also to hear from you if there are things from the towns that you're hearing, have questions about, want to put around the table for discussion. Certainly open if there are any things that you have any questions about or wanted to discuss.
Jeff is walking in, so she's giving her chair.
Jeff a seat since we've got a lot of school committee seats here. There you go. It's all you.
Okay, the next item is the Facilities Subcommittee. Last month, the district received confirmation that the Byfield campus was not accepted for a project for the MSBA. The application process is annual and with a new batch of applications each year, and the district does intend to reapply for 2024. Any decision would become public next December. Our maintenance team is doing what they can with the limited funds in the operating budget in the meantime, but there are some parts of the buildings that are frequent flyers for frequent work. The school committee has opted to create a facility subcommittee, which would allow a small group of members to get into the details about the recurrent building issues with the district administration, and see if any broader interventions could be taken. The school committee members who had volunteered to serve on the subcommittee are Caitlin Hunter, Matt Landers, and Narissa Wallen. As a subcommittee of the school committee, this group would be compliant with open meeting laws, meetings would all be in public, agendas would be posted, and minutes would be taken. We really want this to be as transparent as possible. I would like to ask each of the towns if they could have a liaison to this subcommittee, as I think it's important that you have a voice in the awareness of these discussions. So,
I was going to say, if I could just add, so this is a new subcommittee. This school committee hasn't had a facility-specific subcommittee in the past. Without mentioning another district, there's been a lot of discussion about school building projects. And so, we've had a lot of discussions over the past couple of years about our campus. We now will be applying again in April, by April, I should say, probably in March, for the third time. Hopefully third time is a charm. But as Linda said, we want to make sure that the relationships and discussions we've had thus far are codified a little more formally, as well as she noted, if every year we are delayed, we know the process with the Mass Building Authority is a 5 to 7 year process. Best case scenario, it's 5 years from the time you're accepted in to the time you're finishing a project, more like 6 or 7 years on average. So it's a healthy assumption to say, with another year waiting, we're 6, 7, 8, 9, potentially approaching a decade before we have a completed project. And there are portions of that building that, not for lack of maintenance, just for lack of, or just because of the age of it, like the roof, that are, 25 years plus, and are showing signs of tapping out in a larger scale way. So we wanted to make sure we had an opportunity. This is a formal school committee subcommittee. So the decision-making body is the school committees, but we wanted to make sure we had a representative from each of the towns to sit on that group, to have discussions so that information is flowing back to the select boards. We're hopeful that there's nothing major that has to happen before we get accepted and are in that pipeline and making decisions at a larger scale. But we also want to make sure that line of communication is open in case that's not the case, in case that is not true, I should say. So so I don't. Obviously, I'm not looking for a name tonight, but if you want to identify a person from each town, I think they kept it the school committee is keeping it a subcommittee, which is 3. And I think that if we can have one representative from each town, obviously Kyle's replacement, and John Skanicki, who is our manager, our facilities manager, will be part of that, and having important discussions and sometimes difficult discussions about decisions that need to be made, whether that be, we all talk about that facilities assessment that was done, coming up on 5 years ago now, the first time before COVID. But to engage professionals who could say, yes, it might make sense to invest money here because we don't want to throw away money and put on a new roof that's going to be renovated 2 years later. That's the thinking there, if you want to have members contact you directly with whoever the town representative would be. So happy to answer questions. Yeah.
How often will this committee be meeting, this subcommittee?
To be determined. There isn't a set schedule. Generally, subcommittees meet on a monthly basis. My thought would be get a first meeting scheduled with everyone and have those discussions about what are the actions and the steps we want to take, and then go from there. So as a subcommittee, my guess is the school committee members, so it's, who would you say, Narissa, Matt, and Caitlin, will elect a chair of that subcommittee, and they would be charged with structuring that.
Brian?
Yes.
Will they also be virtual in the afternoon like the subcommittee meeting today?
To be determined.
To be determined.
I want to answer for the subcommittee members.
This is freshly new that we decided this over the past couple of meetings, so the discussions will be ongoing as how this rolls out. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Any more questions?
Who's the new facilities Director, who'd you hire to take Chris? What's
His name is Jonathan Skanicki. He
Really
joined
good.
us. Phenomenal. He's phenomenal. He's Chris Walsh.
He's
had
filling
some
big shoes.
He has some big shoes to fill.
Walsh, but-
Yeah. So Chris has been sorely missed, but yeah. So he came to us. He actually was the trades manager at Harvard Law School. Lived north of Boston. Decided to do the reverse commute. So he again has been with us 7.5 months now.
Yeah.
Wow. 6.5, I should say. So he has proven to be invaluable, incredible amount of skill. And so, yes, we are making great strides. Yeah.
Awesome.
The next item is the FY25 budget development. Brian and Kyle are going to go through the FY25 budget development thus far.
So if I just, on the agenda, we jumped over landlord, tenant, and alternative assessment updates. But we were just going to say we have no updates. So just to call that out since it's on the agenda. Alternative assessment, that's kind of in limbo, no man's land. As far as the landlord tenant, I am working and need the ball's in my court. This is my delay. Every time I think we're good with language, I submit it to the Department of Ed, and they have their two regional schools gurus, and we hash it out, and they find problems with the language, and we need to make more changes. Sometimes the problems are with the language that they propose to begin with. So it's been a bit of a chasing our tails. So still a work in progress, but no substantive update there. So as far as the FY25 budget, our goal tonight will be to give you an abbreviated version of the 2-hour discussion that was had originally a week and a half ago on Wednesday the 17th. You have in your packet a combined budget proposal. Again, I won't go through the narrative at the beginning, but we condensed our process this year. We've communicated this several times now. We knew coming into this year, for many reasons, whether it be just the cost of doing business, inflation, contracts that we settled, knowing full well that there would be a larger impact for this fiscal 25 year. We knew it would be a challenging year. And so we did not have our normal 3-night process where principals and administrators come in and present the needs. I want to say again, we've said this several times, that doesn't mean there aren't needs. That doesn't mean there aren't things that we could be adding or doing differently to provide even more opportunities for our students. But the reality is we knew the number just to get what we have this year into next year would likely be prohibitive. So it was a bit of an odd process this year. We then had further discussion with the committee last night. We kind of jumped right into, there are reductions that we'll talk about in the budget. There are reductions already assumed in this first proposal, but we kind of jumped right into more talk of reductions, and then kind of took a step back and said, let's have a conversation with the towns tonight, and then the committee will be, again, taking this up again starting next week. So it's basically, starting 2 Wednesdays ago, the committee will be meeting every Wednesday night through March 13th. The only caveat is the approval of the tentative budget will shift to a remote meeting from that Wednesday the 14th, it's Valentine's Day, to Tuesday the 13th, and there will be a quick Zoom meeting just to approve the tentative budget. So with that, I'm going to ask Kyle to go through, again, if you want the 3-hour version, Kyle's your guy. He's happy to do it. But we're going to give you a 5 to 10 minute, assuming that you may have seen, heard, and then we're happy to answer questions about the expenditures that are driving the overall budget, and then talk about some reductions and the impact.
Perfect. Yep, so like Brian mentioned, this is the document right here we're looking at. I'll start on page 4. This is going over the increases, and then Brian will jump into the reductions like he shared. Spend a little more time on this page since it's about 2/3 of the total drivers this year. Personnel increases. I'll lump items 1 through 6 all in together. These are going to be the steps and the COLAs associated with our collective bargaining agreements. We have the 2 units with the TRTA, Triton Regional Teachers Association. Unit A is the teachers, B is the instructional assistants. We have cafeteria workers who are not included in this document because that's separately funded through user fees or state revenue. And then we also have our custodials who are actually 1 unit now. So when we look at items 1 through 6, Obviously, some large numbers here. On average, this is a 3% COLA over the prior year. The year we're in had a delayed COLA as well of 0.5% that we'll have to fund as part of FY25, and that's because as we went through the budget process, we had only budgeted 2.5%, so we need to make that up. When you look at items 1 through 6, that total increase, for context, it's helpful to compare that with last year too, right? It's a $200,000 shift or a $200,000 increase from FY24. The main reasons for that being about half of it, 100,000, is that 0.5% COLA for TRTA Unit A members, and then the rest is going to be that growing base. As folks make more, the COLAs, the 3% just amounts to a larger dollar amount. And so the current contracts with Unit A and B are, this was the first year, FY24, FY25, and FY26. So that was essentially a 3-3-3 over those 3 years, which you hear about in the news today.
Yeah, just if we could just pause and Neil, you've historically been part of the negotiations. Christine, you were part of them this past round. Our teachers never, I want to just acknowledge and say, our teachers never came to the table and ever uttered the word strike. They never came with ridiculous demands. Of course, they have a job to do, and they came in with a higher proposal than this, and right, we landed where we're landing. But I just want to say that, through working with our teachers, you don't have to look far or listen to the news, what's going on literally as we speak in Newton, in contracts being settled 14, 15, 16% over 3 years. So this 9% over 3 years, it has a larger impact on our budget. Obviously it does, because we've historically been in the 2s, but it still keeps us in the game as far as the market, and it was not unreasonable compared to what we're seeing in other districts. So we have an impact, and we've got to figure that out, but we went into this knowing full well, and just want to acknowledge and thank our local unit that has never even uttered the word and threatened to go take it to impact the kids, which is what a strike does. So.
Can I ask that question in reference to that? Where are we in reference to this kind of district as far as?
Cycle?
Yeah. No. Where teachers' salaries, are we low end or high end, or, because when I think about it, like ours gets figured out for the whole 20 of North Shore Consortium, and kind of looking at where everybody is, and we try to stay right in the middle. Where is Triton in that?
I will certainly speak for the committee unless someone else has changed their mind, but the goal has always been, we don't want to be the highest, we don't want to be the lowest, we want to be squarely competitive. So it's not as clean. If you can picture a teacher's salary scale, it's a big box, 11 steps, columns based on degrees and credits, or credits and degrees, on up through doctorate. That movement, you might, in some districts, if you look at, we compare everything to the North Shore, to the Cape Ann League, right? Largely, we assume we're going to be competing for employees in the kind of northeast corner of Boston. Obviously, there are folks who travel further than that. We are fairly competitive over the majority of the grid. We're a little less competitive on the high end, a little more competitive on the low end with the instructional assistants. Unit B, we were starting an IA below minimum wage, right? So we made significant increases in the bottom end of the salary schedule for them, and a much smaller increase at the top end. But we do, as on the whole, we're squarely competitive. Both our benefits at 70-30, with our share for medical, it's amazing. I talk to districts that still have an 85-15 or an 80-20, still a lot of 75-25s, but we're competitive in the 70-30. We've definitely lost candidates when we bring them in and they see the compensation package, the benefits package, and we still do lose candidates. I mean, especially I think at the high school level, Masconomet, I'm not speaking out of school, you can look this stuff up, right? Highest salaries in the area, and we will routinely lose candidates, especially in those hard to find specialties where a person can literally shop themselves and have 7 offers, the Linfields and the Mascos are going to beat us on salary. And again, depending on where they are in the salary grid.
Well, I think it's really important. The reason why I ask is not so much the teachers, but like the IAs, because in this staffing crunch that we have, and I'm here to tell you, if you don't have IAs with special ed schools, then they're coming to my school.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's incredibly important to be competitive with IAs, because they're so hard to find anyway. I mean, we're looking desperately. I think I have 3 openings right now for IAs, and they will keep special ed kids in the district. And if you don't have them, they're not having their needs met. They're going to the team's going to meet and say they need to go.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really important to always pay attention to the IAs. A lot of talk happens about teachers, but IAs, as I always say, the backbone of our schools.
Yeah, and so this is year 2 of. This is year 2, right? Yeah, 20,
Correct.
20. So we're in year 2. No, we're in year 1.
Year one,
Next
yeah.
Fiscal year, next year is year 2. This year was a larger impact year for IAs because of that major correction we did, which all took place in the first year. So the one other thing I was going to mention as Kyle was talking, we've talked a lot in past months about the fact that we have far newer staff. There's been a significant amount of turnover, not unique to Triton, but that significant amount of turnover has meant a newer, younger staff, both in age and in seniority on those steps. So whereas at one point we had 70 plus of our educators, roughly 250 educators at that top step, so they're only going to make the cost of living adjustment, we have more and more people in the grid making movement, so they're making both that step movement and the COLA movement. So, so there are benefits and drawbacks to all things. So we'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was perfect.
It was not short. Shocker.
This is the biggest page, right? So jumping on to item number 7 there, the salary contingency, actually carrying the discussion about IAs. So from a financial perspective, one of the challenges we had this year, increasing needs of our student population, IEPs, just from a math exercise, looking at the number of required minutes for students with IEPs versus the number of IAs that we have on staff, and we had to add 4 additional IAs over the course of FY24 to date. And so we did dip into that $150,000 line item, looking to replenish that. Because it was allocated to other budget line items, we do want to maintain that. We're proposing a $150,000 add. For context, when we look at our total payroll for the district, it's about $30 million of payroll as a piece of our $50 million budget. That $150,000 would represent about 0.5% to account for these contingencies. Substitutes, we've been seeing the need for substitutes increase, whether it be parental leaves, medical leaves, things of that nature, to match the trends over the last 3 years, looking to bump that up 50,000. And then lastly, ESSER, this isn't an add, this is a shift. So ESSER is the largest piece of the COVID grant funds that we received as a district. In being conservative, we kept the number of personnel charged to those grant funds to just 1.5 FTEs. I think we were measured compared to the position some other districts are in because we knew those funds were short-term. But the ask here is to maintain those positions and shift the salaries over from the COVID grants over to the general operating budget. I'll pause there. So that's the total personnel costs. Jump to page 7. Transportation. Yellow Bus, we are in the second to last year of our Yellow Bus transportation contract with NRT. We have a 2.5% increase on rates. That 2.5% extrapolates to $37,800, which you see on that line item. We are still carrying 2 extra bus runs because we've been short on drivers. We've been down 4 bus runs over the last 2 years. 2 of those runs were cut as part of the FY24 budget. I think you all see the buses riding around our communities. They're packed. So we're hopeful that we can add those drivers next year. Special ed transportation, the increase there is reflective of a 5% rate increase, as well as additional placements that we've seen. We do get state funding through a reimbursement. They indicated that it'd be a 75% reimbursement. However, for this year so far, they've reimbursed 57%. Not a typo, being the opposite there, kind of weird. So looking towards FY25, we're being conservative with that reimbursement at a 57% rate again, and that would yield a $187,000 increase. And then homeless transportation, unfortunately, the trends we've been seeing, we have if a student loses their housing, goes to, say, Amesbury, we're required to provide transportation for that student from Amesbury to their attending school, and we split the cost with, say, Amesbury or the community where that student is residing. We've been seeing a significant uptick in the amount of, unfortunately, students with displaced, but we're proposing an ad there.
And that is required if they cross the border into Hampshire as well.
Correct.
Yeah, that's one of the only, right, so school choice happens within the state of Massachusetts for homeless transportation. If a student moves into southern New Hampshire, we still have to transport them back. They have a right to return to their home school here in our district. And it can be an hour and a half away. If they choose that that's what they want, they can make that choice, so.
Kyle, do we know why the state dropped it to 50? Is it just because it's a state and they drop it to 57?
Yeah, so the trend over the last couple years has been that they always reimburse at the 75%. I guess prior to that, it was always the initial, so we get a semi-annual reimbursement from the state. The first is January, so we're expecting one pretty shortly. Sorry, we are talking about
circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker. Yep, so that's a quarterly reimbursement. They do an initial level, and then depending on state funding, they may bump that a bit. So that's been a historical trend, but just not over the last 4 years. I'm sorry, yeah, over the last 4 years, it's been at that 75%, so they're going back to the old ways.
Just for the transportation piece.
Right, I know, but this is definitely a way that when select boards talk to their legislatures and their senators and their reps, that we need to say, it needs to go back up to 75%. Yeah. I mean, there's certain things we can fight for, and this is definitely one of them, because this is the state promises us this reimbursement rate, and then they don't come through with their promise, which they always do, but it's also our responsibility to go for us, Dawn and Bruce, and say, okay, this is ridiculous, go back to 75%.
And to be clear, they will say circuit breaker is funded at 75%, and that's accurate, because they're talking about the historical circuit breaker, which is the tuition side. The ask is, you need all of circuit, right? Your law, you wrote it, Student Opportunity Act, phased in transportation over 4 years into the circuit breaker calculation. So you can only say you're funding it at 75% if you're funding both the tuitions and the transportation at 75%.
So they're funding the tuition, but not the...
Correct.
Which is, I mean, I know how much you paid to bus kids to my school, so I know it's a lot of money, so...
Yes, it is. And it's been the challenge of not being able to find, NRT not being able to...
Yeah, we don't have NRT buses coming anymore to my school.
So it's these Happy Wheels and other places that say it's literally 2 to 3 times the cost. Yeah. That's been our budget driver. It's huge.
And for context, to include the offset assumption is $400,000 of circuit breaker reimbursements for this transportation line item at that 57% assumption.
I just have a quick question too. In their transportation contract, is there? I know it's not a very competitive bid. You get one person, but in the contract, I mean, I hear a lot of people complaining about the transportation.
including us.
Yeah, so is there anything in the contract that we can say, I understand you don't have drivers, but that's not my problem. I'm paying you money for a service, you have to perform that service. Is there anything in that contract that says, if I'm paying you X, you're only providing me Z, we're meeting somewhere in the middle, and that's where I'm paying you. I'm not paying you full price.
Right, so we pay the runs that they can fill. So any of those runs, so like Kyle said, 2 years ago, we had 23 buses. Last year, 4 of them they couldn't fill. 2 of those we cut out of the budget for this year.
Yeah.
We still want to keep those 2 because we want to fill those and go from 19 back to 21 because they're overfilled. We're paying for 19 buses.
Okay.
So, yeah, so to your point, no, we're not paying for something that we're not receiving. We can't in Massachusetts. But also, there are, right, are there levers we can pull, right? So anyone's involved in public procurement, you have to go with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So responsive is, did they respond to the bid accurately? Responsible is reputation and history. So there's certainly a case we can make to say that NRT comes back to the table and they're not responsible because they failed to meet the basic requirements. But if they're the only one sitting at the table.
They've bought everybody else around
So
them.
Beacon now owns every other, Beacon owns Salter, Beacon owns NRT, Beacon owns Coppola, Beacon owns, you name it. It's all owned now by Beacon Mobility, which is not based in Massachusetts. And they're not going to pit their subsidiaries against one another.
Yeah, but we can put pressure on our state legislators to make them do their job too at the same time, because
I would
there's other
gladly stand
avenues, as
beside
you
you on
know.
that.
So if that, us 3 communities need to say, hey, we understand you allowed a monopoly to happen in the state of Massachusetts. I should have been open on this one. But, you can't allow this to continue to happen. So if that's something we need to push on, I will. I mean, it's 57, we're spitting off a lot, we're losing from the state, so it's a sinking ship if it continues. So I just think transportation is something that we need to help you guys put a lot of pressure on somebody.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a single Triton voice either, right? I mean, this is everywhere across the state, and certainly in the region. So we know we're rebidding next year for fiscal '26. In districts that have done that, like, we're assuming it's going to be a hundreds of $1,000 increase when we rebid.
I would add at the conference for the Mass Association of School Committees this year, that was a priority to pressure the lawmakers to investigate the bidding process and look at that.
Well, because it's not a fair bidding process, you only have one company doing it. They can say, oh, you're going to bid here, you're going to bid here, either way, it all funnels down to the same company. It's actually against the law, so I don't even know how it even happened. So.
Just magically no one else shows up.
I get it, but if you can control your product, your service, everything, how's it a fair process? It's not a failed bid. So, there's all kinds of things that go into that, as you know.
For sure.
You want questions after the presentation or during the presentation?
I think it makes sense to just, as we go through. Yeah.
Okay. Because, I have to agree that if the state said that they're supposed to reimburse 75%, they're only doing 57, why are we busting our budgets trying to fulfill these unfunded state mandates? I hate to pick on special ed, but let's just use that as an example. If we don't have the money, we can't fund all of it.
So the way that plays out, right? So you take that scenario, we say we're not going to provide a service that an IEP team has determined is required, whether that be services, ideally services within the school setting. If we can't meet the needs within a school setting, the team determines that the student needs to be placed out. We say, no, we're not going to do that.
It's illegal.
Right? The parent will easily walk into DESE and say, the team agreed this needed to happen, and the district said no. And the child will be placed out, and we will be sent the bill, including transportation. So there isn't, I hear your frustration, and I totally agree, but the most maddening part is they're not reimbursing on this side, but none of the laws have changed over here, that allow us to make any decisions other than what is happening.
And an IEP is a federal contract. It's a contract that's...
Right, I realize that probably it was a poor example. There are probably other examples that I think we would have wiggle room in saying, you didn't fund it, you're not paying your share in other aspects, we can't afford the other aspects.
Yeah, the problem is none of our funding, so the only funding that comes into the district, if you think about from the state, is Chapter 70, it's general. Right, if we don't do our end-of-year report on time, they withhold payments, right? So they literally hold that as a carrot. Any other grants that we chase down, or entitlement grants, are very restrictive on what we can spend that on. So we can look at transportation, but that doesn't get us out of the requirement, both on special education and Big Yellow Bus regular transportation, from providing a required service. So, rightly so, a parent could complain, and it would be reinstated, and we would have no choice but to do it.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the problem, is that we literally, so what happens is when we have to make reductions, we make reductions
They
in staffing.
hold the whole deck, and they've marked the whole deck
They do.
accordingly. So,
They sure do.
Yeah. And then, right, so then the
Our
legislature
officers are-
allocates through the Department of Education. The education has to make the decisions, but there's a pot of funds, and then the Department of Ed makes decisions based on, like that 57%. Jay Sullivan was sitting here, he was saying he has to make sure he sees all the numbers before he finalizes that. Maybe it turns into 75. So I don't want to sit here and defend the Department of Ed, but they have to dole out the funds that they receive. They don't have an unlimited amount either. So, yeah, it's broken. It's very broken, for sure.
There's a lot of things broken at
Yeah,
DSC.
yeah.
Just look at the Student Opportunity Act. We got, what, $66,000 from that 660-something million? So that's totally a broken formula right there as well. There's nothing we can do. That's why they call them mandates. You don't have a choice but to do them. Or else our students...
understand, because, it's a mandate, and they hold all the power.
Yeah.
So,
And we are...
do we say yes, or do we just nod our head yes?
Well,
It doesn't make any difference.
And that's why I said reach out to, that's what, the only thing that we can do is making sure we're writing letters to our representatives.
Yeah.
And again, I think they'll fight for us. I think we all have good reps right now in this area. I mean, we always have, but I think we just keep pushing that and driving that home. Who we have representing us, that's unacceptable. But, they'll fight, and we'll see what happens. Usually nothing.
Yeah.
But it's worth fighting.
I think it's the problem when I have 3.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
you
true.
have cities that have 10
Yeah.
representation, so who do you think's going to win the argument in the State House?
But like Brian said, this isn't just a Triton district
No.
thing. This is the entire state,
Yeah.
Full state.
It's 57%. Not what Linda was talking about, that
But now
is.
the
up
big
there.
cities, all the money starts at the big city, it works its way out, and we're just the very top of their coastline.
But transportation is for everybody. Like Boston, they have what's called MECO, where they're transporting their kids out into the communities,
Yeah.
and so they're getting the same reimbursement rate. So I think this is
They're
one that
getting the
we...
57?
Yeah. So I think this is one that everybody would be on board.
Unlike regional transportation, that's unique to us. That's 87, and so that's
Oh, you
always the
get me
first
going on
chopping
regional,
block.
now you're going to see my head pop.
So this is every one of the 351 communities through their region or as a town
Special.
has access to this special education circuit breaker. Yeah.
That's what it is, you can't fight, City Hall, even though we're
true.
City Hall.
True.
The last box there at the bottom of page 7, without going line by line, the theme here is we utilize Maya for our benefit packages. We're still waiting on our renewal rates, but the trust released their averages, or their range, between 2.2 and 9.6, I think it is, the average being 6%. We expect to land, we budgeted 6%. Based on our trend rates, we expect to land right in that range. We'll find out in the next 2 weeks. what our actual renewal rates are.
To note, it could go higher or lower than that, hopefully lower.
Page 9, utilities and maintenance. You can see we're keeping all of those level, except for the middle school, high school campus maintenance. I don't think I have to belabor that line item. Certainly our costs have increased and our needs have increased with keeping that campus up to date. Or, that's the wrong word. Keeping that campus
Operational,
safe.
safe.
Yeah.
How are we to date, budget-wise? Are we on schedule, or is there a surplus? The only reason why I'm asking is that, sure, you can budget for zero increase in maintenance or electricity, we'll say, but
I can get into the detail there. Yeah, so electricity is probably a good example. We actually have a pretty significant increase in our rates next year. However, we have the solar farm off of Rabbit Road in Salisbury, and we've accumulated some significant solar credits over the years. So that increase in rates will be able to fully offset utilizing those accumulated solar credits, so we won't have to increase for FY25 going forward. FY26, 27, we're going to take a layered approach to bringing that up to actuals. But then in terms of maintenance, this isn't ideal. I mean, I look at the elementary schools there. We've been keeping those maintenance costs on target for FY24, our budget to actual. The needs far exceed that, but we're trying to do it in a cost, in the best way possible. The middle school, high school campus, we're about $80,000 over budget this year with things that we just haven't had a choice, whether it's the rooftop units going.
Are these figures reasonable if you're over budget already? And I assume that you're paying for it somehow. You know, I'm not going to ask where the excess money is coming from, but
you can ask. We report it every month to the school committee. There's no secrets.
Yeah. So at finance subcommittee, we talk about that every month.
But you know, it almost seems like it's nice to put it level funded, but is it realistic? And if you're overspending now, what makes you think you're going to be underspending to bring it back in line?
Are you talking about any one specific line or just in general?
Just in general.
So the electricity, as heating fuel is level, electricity, as Kyle said, will offset it fully with the first year of credits and then phase that in over the coming years. As far as Newbury, Pine Grove, and Salisbury maintenance, yes, there are things we could do if we increased that line, but for all the routine and preventative maintenance, as well as some potential unexpecteds, we feel like those lines are okay. The middle school, high school, we're increasing it by $75,000. We also do have, still included in here is the continued transfer into stabilization. So we talked about the fact that we have that. We're holding on to that for the feasibility study, but this budget adds another $75,000, so that's $150 that's going in per year. And if there were a larger catastrophic event, a roof failure, a $50,000 repair at the middle school, high school, we would have to dip into stabilization to deal with that.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for asking the question. Page 10, I'll jump into that. Tuitions, out-of-district tuitions. So this is going to be when at Triton, we can't successfully meet the needs of certain special education students, and they have to go to a private placement. That increase that you see in the right-hand column is going to be the net of increased placements we've seen, as well as an offset of circuit breaker reimbursements from the state. The theme over the last few years has certainly been the increased costs. Private placements for FY25 is estimated to be at 5%, but then the conversation of was it 12 or 14 for this year. So we're seeing an increased revenue as well. So that's helped offset, that's alleviating, even though it's a big number, 265,000, we're finally seeing some relief, use that word cautiously, from the state in that line item, but certainly challenging to navigate. And then we indicated the special ed contracted services and supplies line items there of a shift between the two. There's other line items too where we'll have a level fund approach. Maybe we need to shift some money from supplies to a contracted services, but this certainly highlights that. And the reason for that 32,000 is there was a position that we were previously outsourcing, and we were able to bring that in-house through existing personnel, just a shift in caseloads and responsibilities. But then with some of our specialized programs over at Newbury Elementary School, the specialty equipment that those students need, the medically fragile program, the need there is significant. So we're proposing that that be added to the supplies, more like an equipment type line item. Question there?
Could you expound a little more on the North Shore Consortium and the assessment costs of $65,000 per student? How many students is that, are we subject to?
I will happily take that. Yes, so I was part of the decision. So we are a member of North Shore Consortium. There is a project that started as an HVAC project and grew, we'll say, right?
Yep.
Fair to say. So it is pretty much their main campus. What was rooftop units is now, in essence, a full HVAC upgrade, rooftop units, boilers, full electrical, as well as some other things. So the board had, the Board of Superintendents is 20 of us. The need to address that, the cost assumption went from 5 to 10 based on the scope of work expanding pretty considerably. And then with the bids and the current inflation, it went north of close to 14 million. So there's been some value engineering. I forget the exact bottom line now. But what the needs were is an increase in tuitions moving forward in the overall operating capital to pay the bond for the project. And then up front, there was a need for cash to get the project. The bank needed to see spending local money before they would issue a bond. So it's a little different. A collaborative doesn't have to go out and publicly issue bonds. They're working directly with a bank, which actually be great if towns and districts could do that, because you can actually get a better rate. And so what that means is the board voted to have a leveled, a banded approach for a one-time assessment. They needed to collect $2 million. So we could have said there's 20 member districts. Each district is going to pay $100,000. Or if we take Peabody and Triton, we have 10 students there. Peabody has 100 and I forget the exact number. Or maybe even 300, but it did not make sense for a district as large as Peabody to say that pay the same assessment as a smaller district. So we created bands of roughly 30,000 to about 185,000. We fell into the 65,000. The way it's going to be assessed, Larry Fleming, who's the director of finance, they have worked with the Department of Ed. If it's billed out to us as a per student increase in tuitions, it becomes circuit breaker eligible. If it's a one-time assessment, it is not. So we will pay that as a one-time assessment on our first bills next year, 75% of which would get reimbursed to us in fiscal 26. Yeah. It's been a wild 6 months going through this process.
Oh, yeah.
There aren't many anyone, including those at North Shore Consortium, that are thrilled with the outcome other than the project is going to get done and it's needed, right? So this is, I mean, it's an HVAC upgrade, and we've got.
You said 14 million? I thought it was 25 million.
No.
What, it was 14 million?
14 was the, yeah, and so it's back into the 12s now.
Okay.
I like how the rumor mill locally usually doubles at least.
Always.
I think I think that's the email that we got as staff, saying it was a 25 million unit. So, yeah. So we were all very
Interesting.
very, very fearful, because there would have been a domino effect with shutting down schools.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was, I mean, to argue the project, it's an HVAC unit in a building that houses a significant number of medically fragile students, where the air conditioning has to work and the heat has to work. It's literally a matter of life and death. So it's, yeah, it was lots of, you can go back and watch the meetings, lots of angst, lots of discussion, but that's where we landed as a must-do.
Where does this $65,000 assessment appear in the budget?
That's included in that 265 for out-of-district tuitions.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's all part of our students who attend North Shore are in that 9,000 series out-of-district tuition line.
And that line is net of the circuit breaker reimbursements that we receive. There's a $1.3 million assumption built into that.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we put the full budget together, you see that page where it shows you the total cost minus the circuit breaker and what the net, what that net total increase of 262, 265. Oh, I can't see anything without my glasses.
Okay.
All right.
Page 11, school choice sending tuitions. So if a student choices out of the district, we have to budget the cost of that out of the operating budget. If we have students who choice into the district, we receive funding, but we deposit that money into a revolving account, and there are salaries and other costs charged there. So this particular, right at the top, item number 1, is our school choice sending, so the cost that we appropriate. Unfortunately, that trend has continued over the last couple of years, where we have the goal of an equilibrium, the same number of students choicing out of the district, we're able to choice students in. Unfortunately, the last numbers I ran, we have 115 students choicing out, and we have 80 choicing in.
What is that again, 150?
115?
115.
It's on page 11. It's in the narrative there.
Oh, okay.
And then 80 choicing out.
80.
And so the cost of those 115 students amounts to about $750,000. That's an increase over the FY24 current year.
Just not to speak a lot about it, but the number of students at the high school going to Newburyport has seen a marked uptick.
Do we know why?
In the conversations, there's been lots of conversations, and it's the building. They don't want to be in that building. So that is not a scare tactic that we're not saying, right? That is the message we're hearing from folks.
So it's mostly at the high school level versus the elementary?
The newer, yes, yeah. As a general rule, yes, kids tend to stay at the elementary and choice when they get,
Middle or high.
especially if they're going to, I mean, we lose kids going to private at 5th or 6th if they go into the prep or whatever that starts in 5th or 6th grade.
Which cost us nothing. But.
Which costs us nothing, right? We lose the number on our Chapter 70 calculation, but yeah.
I'm not surprised by that.
Quick question. Does that include Essex, Aggie, and Whittier, or is that a separate?
Separate.
Okay.
So, yeah, so you as the towns pay the
We pay
Whittier
that.
bill directly. You pay the Essex Aggie. So again, just to confirm, if our students want to go to a technical high school, they go to Whittier. If they want the agricultural program, they go to Essex North Shore Agricultural. If a student goes and does exploratory in their freshman year at Essex Aggie Tech, and decides to go tech, they have to transfer to Whittier. Okay. Unless they become a school choice student, and then it just becomes a separate charge to you directly. So it's.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. But we should say, sorry.
I'm glad.
There's a reason we go on forever. This does include, call a spade, right? This does include Massachusetts Virtual Academy, right? So that was never a thing years and years ago. And even before COVID, Mass Virtual Academy existed, it's two of them, but it was not well known. I was just reading a piece, and it's all over the place, about this shift of kids realizing and families realizing my kid can go to school virtually and I don't have to deal with transportation and figuring stuff out. So we get charged somewhere in the vicinity of $9,000 and change for every student that goes to TECA, is the name of the school, where we get charged $5,000 if they choose to go in Newburyport or Amesbury, Ipswich, almost double. So we've seen I forget the exact number. I was looking at Nicole, something like 15 kids that are leaving the district to go to TECA, which is in the vicinity of $150,000. So.
The charter school, that's going to be largely River Valley. We have 43 students. That's the cost that we pay. Page 12, it's the last section here. Looking to continue two commitments that we had set in place a few years back, the first being the stabilization fund contribution. The school committee adopted a long-term financial planning policy, which largely established varied reserves. Our current reserves levels, we have about $1.6 million in stabilization, $650,000 in E&D, and then there's, I'll pause there. So what we're looking to do is, I think you had mentioned earlier, we have it established a $75,000 contribution. We're looking to increase that to $150,000, so it's an additional 75. This is all part of that adopted policy that was established, so looking to continue to do that. And the $1.6 million there that we have in stabilization, that's the focus of that balance is going to be for a feasibility study when we get admitted into the MSBA program, so that we can explore the various options. It also, offers a plan B, essentially, if we do have any sort of large-scale capital need that pops up on an emergency basis, like the roof or something of capital nature. For context, too, the rating agencies recommend that communities as well as school districts have about 15% of their annual operating expenditures in reserves. For us, with a $50 million budget, you can do the math there. So we're not close to that 15. However, we're trying to make a concerted effort with movement towards that level. It's going to help us with not only our financial strength and flexibility, but when we go out to bond for a future project, it's going to yield lower interest rates or more favorable interest rates for us as a district.
Just as a reminder, whatever project we do for the middle high school campus has to be bonded by the district, which our interest rate will affect the assessment that the member towns ultimately receive. Obviously, you're going to have to approve the project. So,
Is there an OPEB funding commitment contained within the stabilization commitment, or how
so that's years 3 and 4.
Yep, so thank you for mentioning that. So as part of that long-term financial policy, it established two different line items years over a 4-year period. The first 2 years are at $75,000 apiece to get that stabilization fund contribution to $150,000. Then years 3 and 4 at $75,000 apiece are to establish an OPEB contribution. And then ultimately the goal, Essex Regional in terms of OPEB, because $150,000 a year isn't going to be enough for OPEB. You see the liability on our financial statements. The plan, and it's outlined in that policy as well, is when Essex Regional is fully funded. Right now it's on target as a funding mechanism through 2035. The goal is to shift that appropriation over to OPEB.
That used to sound like so far into the future.
10 years, right? Yeah. And lastly, the Chromebook refresh program. So we had started the 159 plan, some of us call. So we went one-to-one with Chromebooks at the onset of the pandemic. That was funded through ESSER COVID relief grant funds. The plan established a four-year funding mechanism, $50,000 a year to integrate that program, the cost of the program, into our operating budget. So we have, like it shares there, it's FY23 through FY26, so FY25 would be year 3 of that implementation. So just about there, but we'd like to continue that.
So we're getting funds for that, and all we're out of pocket for is the $50,000 a year?
Say that one more time? Sorry.
You're receiving funds for these Chromebooks?
No.
No, we did. So during COVID, we purchased a device for everyone using federal grants. Now
we have to buy them ourselves?
Correct. So we did a 4-year phase-in. So the devices that were leased and bought previously are phasing out. I mean, Chromebooks are great. They're cheap. They don't last a real long time. So 4 years is pretty solid. So we now, with the 50,000, last year was the first year. Every first, fifth, and ninth grader got one. They then keep it for 4 years. This year, we, again, first, fifth, and ninth graders got one. Next year, first, fifth, and ninth grade. And then eventually, as of the 5th year, it will be a $200,000 line. There's no more increase needed, and just 1/4 of the devices cycle out every year.
Okay, but you determined that their useful life is 4 years rather than 6 years or something like that.
Exactly. That's what this.
So we can buy them. The lease, a 4-year lease is pretty much the longest they'll go. We could
Okay,
buy
so
them.
they're leased.
Yeah, so these are leased. Yep. So it's a way to make sure, once we have that $200,000 line, there's no need. I've said this for my entire tenure. If it doesn't walk, let's lease it, right? Because you get an assumed cost then baked into your budget that you know you're always going to have money refreshing to buy new technology. When we built the building, the printers lasted like 10 years and then all died at the exact same time, and there was no printers in the building. So that's very typical of a building project, but
right.
If we lease, we just kind of have that perpetual stream.
So the maintenance, upkeep, and software updates are covered in the lease?
It's all part.
So partially. So our tech team also maintains a number of these in-house as well. They were all certified through a program so that there's a maintenance line item for things that aren't covered, like if a keyboard if one of them gets thrown against a wall and keyboard breaks, our staff is trained in-house, and there's, within the IT budget, a maintenance line item there.
That's every day in my world.
Yeah, yeah.
And we,
Every day in every school.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's
we
thrown
used to
in my
send
world.
those out. We used to pay an added cost on the lease for that maintenance, but we were able to, I think the cost was 1/4 of what we were paying by able to do it in-house through our staff. So we
basically became like an HP certified repair shop using our people.
Realized some savings there.
So we can submit the warranty information just like another vendor could.
So I take it these Chromebooks go with the person, and the person can use it for their own personal use?
So they're controlled by the district. So when they leave, everything is, right, the world is cloud-based. So when they take that home and do homework, they're working in our ecosystem. Our filters, our SIPA compliance, our programs, our resources and tools. Everything is through, they can't go home and get on their home Wi-Fi and bypass our systems. Our systems are integrated into the cloud. So it's largely, I would say, upper elementary, middle, and high school carry the devices with them all the time. Lower primary grades tend to have them in classrooms on carts, but use them very, very routinely. This is the new world. Things are happening. Curricula we're buying cloud-based subscriptions, right? Gone are the textbooks. I mean, that doesn't mean there aren't any textbooks. There are still textbooks for those who like to pick up an old-fashioned textbook, but largely we're going to
Soon you guys will be
resourced.
teaching code.
We're already
Oh, they
teaching
are?
code. You kidding me? We're winning competitions teaching code. Just saying.
I'm just saying that all the kids are no code.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be able to write it. It's going to be like the
Should.
English language.
Kathy Norton.
Coding
She's
is
coding
an
teacher.
incredible mind exercise. It teaches you more than how to make something. So TEF funded these things called, what do they call them? Microbits. It's called Bitcoin. And literally, our students have been working with those, learning how to code. So it's, yeah, that is the world we're living in, and it's the world we are
It
teaching.
was certainly less expensive when I threw my notebook when I was in school.
Yeah.
Yes. 1 room, 2-room schoolhouse, how many rooms?
1 room, Lower Green.
Yeah, Lower Green.
So that's all of the cost driver increases. Obviously, the number in the bottom right corner of that page is when we look at trends around the state and nationally, whether it be inflation, medical insurance. I mean, we went over each of these detailed line items of what's driving these increases, and it's we haven't been immune to these trends.
Right, so I'll actually be, all of the North Shore superintendents are meeting tomorrow, and one of the agenda items is our budgets, because we are not alone, right? As Kyle just said, no district is immune, no town is immune, no business is immune, no person is immune in their own finances. And so this is a challenge that every district is seeing almost universally. So that $3.3 million, $3.4 million, almost $3.5 million increase figure right out of the gate, we knew, right? That is obviously way more than our towns can support. So we brought to the school committee with our original proposal something I can say I've never done in my time here, where right off the bat we are coming with proposed reductions. I should say that the committee received this document in presentation and had discussion on the 17th, had more discussion last night. These are not final cuts. This was our first pass at reductions where we feel like we can save funds and have the least impact. So just to walk through these quickly, we have universal free meals. Thankfully, the governor did include free meals in her H2 House 2 budget. There is some wonder that might not be enough, so that's remains to be seen as it goes through the process. But with universal meals, more funding is available in that food service revolving account. So we'll be shifting to medical plans, full family packages for benefits from the general fund into the food services account. These next two are changes we've already had to make, unfortunately. These are changes, we had an SEL, social emotional learning educator, and a STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics teacher that we put into place 2 years ago in the budget process. It was a need, there is a value, there is an incredible output from these roles. Ideally, each of the principals wanted one of their own. That would have been 6 new people. We hired one of each and shared them. They were rotating through the elementary schools. One of them looking towards next year and knowing that it would be hard to hold on to those positions. We had some mid-year departures. That the SEL teacher is also a licensed clinician. There was a need that emerged in one of the programs for a therapist to make sure we did not lose that person should we get to the end of this year and make cuts. We moved her into that position. Similarly, there was a mid-year shift for happening in end of this week into next week for a science teacher at the middle school. And similarly, we moved some of you may know Jo Leet, former Salisbury Elementary teacher. She's been the STEM teacher. She's moving over to the middle school as a science teacher. Again, none of those things we wanted to do, but we had high quality, high impact educators that we wanted to make sure we retained. And so both of those positions are not included in next year's budget. At Newbury, it's not a savings, but we were due, again, with the fluctuations in enrollments, when we had numbers 100 per grade level and you had 5 sections, going to 4 sections has less impact. When you have a little bit less and you're going from 4 to 3, there's even more impact. We now largely have 3 sections at every grade level across the district. There are a handful of 4s and a handful of 2s. Newbury was actually due to add a sixth grade section back based on their class enrollments, and they are in the back of the budget here. So by not in adding that teacher, that's going to put class sizes in the 25, 26 range for sixth grade at Newbury. That's big, right? For a fifth or sixth grade, for any grade, that's a large grade, that's a large class. I know those of you who are former educators and some of us who went to school a long time ago, that doesn't seem like a large number, but that today's world is a very different world, and that's a big class. So we took a similar approach at both Pine Grove and Salisbury as far as the sixth grade. At Pine Grove, it's actually a reduction. There'll be a shifting of staff. It's actually a retiring educator coming out of special education and reassigning roles. It would be one less section at sixth grade. Again, it could be another grade level, but we're showing it at sixth grade. Again, class sizes are 24, 25, not ideal. I'll go as I go through this. The first cut or the first shift we would be doing regardless. That shifting that 40 into food services, best of times, worst of times, that shift would happen. The SEL and STEM teacher, that is only because we have to make the tough decisions. The NES, PGS, and SES sixth grade teachers, those are only because we have to make tough decisions. At Salisbury, the class sizes are a little more favorable, but that would be the class where it would be the most impact. And that reduction of one sixth grade would take it to class sizes of 19 or 20. And we should say, as we talked through this with the school committee, we have to finalize enrollments. Things fluctuate wildly throughout the spring, so we don't confirm this until the end of the year. At Salisbury, we had a discussion about this last night. These two, the reduction of 2 special educators is actually driven by caseloads and needs. This would be a change we'd be making even if this wasn't a year where we needed to make reductions. We've talked about this over the years. We've had the discussion about why does it cost more to educate less students? And we've talked a lot about how we have reduced significantly, commensurate with the number of kids, the classes, the regular classroom teachers, and we've been adding more and more other supports, whether it's behavioral and mental health or special education or other interventionists. This is an adjustment based on caseloads and attrition. Salisbury has dipped below 400 students. I just said Salisbury Elementary has dipped below 400 students. So we're now seeing that the majority of newer homes, newer residents are condos, right? And school-age children are not moving into those units. So Pine Grove is now the largest elementary, then Salisbury, then Newbury Elementary. And Newbury would be the smallest if there's more school choiced-in students there. But with choiced students at Newbury, Salisbury is actually smaller by a few students. It fluctuates by the day. So with that shift, and based on caseloads, students shifting to district-based programs, that reduction of 2 special educators would be being proposed even if this was not a reduction year. At the middle school, it's a current educator who is going to take on, she's dual certified as an English learner educator, and we'll be able to cover her other sections with other educators and shift her into an EL role. It actually ends up saving a fifth of a position. One instructional assistant, again, that does not change services to students. It's actually based on a reduced need. Core sections at the high school is $102,000 in savings. Those of you who have worked or been in a high school, right, it's a very different animal than an elementary school. A teacher teaches all the content in an elementary school. It's obviously departmentalized in a high school. So when you build the schedule, you may need one more section of math and one less section of social studies. So there are these floating sections that just emerge. So again, as the overall enrollment at the high school has decreased, there's a number of sections. There's no one individual that's cut here. It's actually .1s and .2s that we can pull out of the budget. No personnel impact, and it's actually just a straight savings. Over the page, again, another instructional assistant being reduced at the high school. Again, not an impact. It's about how we're going to realign the services being delivered, and will still be delivered. And then within the high school athletics department, it's a shift. We have been without administrative assistant for the athletic director for a full year now. It started out with a position that we posted and couldn't fill it. Over the last half a year, we decided, right, let's just give it a try. So it's now been a full calendar year since last January. And it's not ideal, but we can make it work. So we're proposing reducing that entirely. And then again, there's a couple other teams that, as our enrollment has dropped, you now have varsity, everyone knows varsity, junior varsity, and what was freshman is called JV2. So there are several JV2 teams that we just don't have enough students to fill all those teams. So the funding that we were holding for coaches and other programs, we're pulling that out. So with a savings of $866,000, that takes that 3.47 down to 2.613. Over the next couple pages, I won't go through in detail.
Before we go on to that,
yep.
There's like one in Newberry, two in Pine Grove, and three other sections in Salisbury that would fit in the class size being increased into the 22 to 26 range. Are you considering those?
That will be a topic of discussion as we go through the future weeks.
Okay.
Right? So as of yet, a 3 to a 2. So if I'm on page 16, right, I'm looking at Newbury Elementary. We've got 60 students in kindergarten projected for next year. Let's take first grade for next year. We have 52 students. It's a 17, 17, 18.
Right.
If I put it in half into two sections, that's 2 first grade classrooms of 26. I can tell you I will never stand in this position and tell you that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there would be no first grade teachers left if we made class sizes of 26.
At that grade level.
At that grade level, right? It's not ideal at 5th grade, 6th grade.
But it's more manageable.
It's manageable.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah. So that's where you have to look at ideal. If we're looking at, ideal versus feasible, ideally we're at the 20 mark, no more than 22, 23 in the upper elementary. So we're looking at class sizes, absolutely. We're looking at everything. Yep. So this was a first pass, if you will, where we felt like we could make savings that have impact, but the least worst choice, right, if you will. So on pages 16, 17, and 18, you've got class sizes, enrollments, and then you've got special education caseloads. For example, on page 18, I had mentioned that we would be making those reductions of 2 special educators at Salisbury regardless. You can see for average caseloads, the last very bottom of the page on 18, total number of IEPs with general support, total number of special educators, and then the average caseloads. I will say it, we've said it several times, this is not straight math, right? You can't say, I have this many IEPs. You could have 2 IEPs that have 3 times the minutes and requirements of 10 IEPs. So it's not straight math. But you can see on page 18 that even with the reduction of those two special educators at Salisbury, Newbury's got a average caseload of 10.2, 9.7 at Pine Grove, 7.1 at Salisbury, and then roughly 13.5 at the middle school and the high school. So that is not a class size, again, just to confirm. That is providing individualized support based on an IEP, which could be a small amount of services or significant hours of service per day for students. So net impact is the 2.6 number. We take you to the next pages in the packet. The next 3 pages in order, unless you've messed them up, should be, so the first one should say town assessment calculation. It's got an example across the front, and then an enrollment document, and then a minimum local contributions. And then there's the colorful one we'll talk about last. I just want to make sure there are some new folks around the table, and it's never a bad time to just do a quick reminder of how we have to, no choice in the matter, assess our member communities for our enrollment. Again, back on the agenda, we have no new information. We've been talking about an alternative assessment since 1792. And so we continue to have that discussion, but without coming to an agreement, our regional agreement uses the statutory method. So I just want to walk through really quickly how that works. This is this year's fiscal 24's budget. I am not putting anything that looks like a budget in front of anyone this early in the process. This is this year's budget. So just to walk you through, there's 5 steps, right? So we start at the top. The total spend for the fiscal 24 is $49.46 million. If you were looking at the page before this in the budget, you would see revenues in interest income, Chapter 70, state aid, regional transportation, Medicaid reimbursement. I think that's it, right? $10.3 million worth of other revenues. Whatever is not received in other revenues, we assess to the town. So for this current year, we're assessing $39.105 million to our member towns. The first thing each of our 3 towns have to do is satisfy their, sometimes called an MRLC, a minimum required local contribution. It's what the formula says, not our data, your local data, your equalized valuation, and your median income data, along with enrollment. DOR, Division of Local Services, calculates that based on town-specific data and says exactly what you need to pay as a minimum starting point. So the first step is that we subtract off of the total assessments each of your minimum local contributions. Just about 6.6 for Newbury this year, 7.3 for Rowley, just shy of 9 million for Salisbury. 22.86 is the combined minimum required local contribution. So we net that off the 39 from number 1, and we arrive at $16.2 million. That is the portion that is divvied up, if you will, based on your percentage share. Salisbury has historically been the largest portion of the district, Rowley the middle, and Newbury the smallest. I can tell you that's shifting. By the time our elementary schools, over the next, 6 years, move on up through the high school, Rowley is looking like it will shift to the largest, then Salisbury, then Newbury. So with that shift, or just for this year, we take each of your percent shares, Newbury's 28.5, Rowley 32.6, Salisbury 38.8, almost 39, multiply that by that 6.24 from number 3, and each of the amounts is the 4.6 for Newbury, the 5.3 for Rowley, and the 6.3 for Salisbury. And then we just do simple 4th grade, now we'll call it 2nd grade math. It's actually, we do this in preschool now. We've just brought it all the way down, right? So you have to pay your minimum from step 1, calculation 2. Then you have to pay your portion of that amount above minimum, so the percentage of that 16.2 million, and that's what your assessment is. We literally have no control how we can assess other than that formula, because our regional agreement says we have to use the statutory formula. So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next 2 pages are the 2 factors
For the next 2 pages.
that are contributing here, right? So we have, the first is enrollments. You can see last year, our overall enrollment, foundation enrollment dropped, what was the total number? 68 total students. Last year we went up 2, I think, something like that. If you look on that page, Newbury's is 617, Rowley 708, Salisbury 831. For fiscal 25, Newbury will be 28.62%, which is an 11% increase. Rowley will be 0.11%. Thank you very much for that very friendly correction. If you would like an 11, you just let me know, okay, Newbury reps? So, sorry, Rowley decimals matter. Rowley goes to 32.84. It's an increase of 0.19, 1/5 of a percent. And Salisbury goes to 38.54, drops 0.3 of a percent. Again, that's our enrollment. So then we go to the next page, and that's the minimum local contributions. This is that step 2. So if you look at, you can see these same numbers. The FY24 is on that first sheet that says example across it that I showed you. Newbury's minimum local is going up over $500,000. Rowley's is going up over 400, oddly close to almost exactly 100,000 more, or less rather. In Salisbury's has increased only 338,000. I say only because it's the smallest. So Salisbury's seeing a 3.78% increase in the minimum local contribution. Newbury is more than double that as far as your percentage increase of your minimum local contribution. Again, that's data that's reported from the towns. We have no control of that. So there is a shift where Salisbury has decreased their proportion. Rowley's getting a slightly larger increase, right? Roughly 0.2%, or of a percent increase. And Newbury's only 0.1% increase. But because Newbury first has to satisfy a minimum local contribution that's almost double others, Newbury ends up with the largest increase. So if we then go to the colorful page, we can at the top, that shows the first numbers, right? The numbers at the bottom of the example page, 11.2, 12.6, 15.25. If we reassessed the current year based on the new numbers, you can see that Salisbury, it's shifting 205,000 out of Salisbury, little bit into Rowley, and the majority of that into Newbury. So that's just the net effect of the enrollment and minimum local contribution swings. So that's before we even get to next year and any increases. If there was zero increase, Salisbury's assessment would go down. Newbury's would still go up 172,000 next year. Down below, you have three scenarios. I will not go into this because there is not a lot of science behind this. This is the result of committee discussions, just looking at possibilities. The green matches the proposal as it was issued as it was presented. I should say issued. Sounds official. As it was presented on January 17th. That 2.613 million is the increase you see. That's offset. We know we're going to get 131,000 in new Chapter 70. That is actually, I know Rowley had submitted a request to reassess the current year's budget to what was it? It was Chapter 70 and what else? Regional transportation, yes. The Chapter 70 we knew, right? That was a number that was, they gave us 30,000 more at the end of the year. After we finalized our budget, roughly $66,000. Regional transportation, still we don't know what that number will be until June. So that 113,000 is incorporating that first 66, plus we only received another $30,000, that'd be great, $30 per pupil, so another 66. So that 2.61 is offset by 131,000 in Chapter 70. So you can see the net assessment shown in that green box is 2.482 million. You can see the resulting impact for the three towns. If we cut another 232, whether it be those cuts plus or reworking an additional 232,000 in cuts, gets the assessments to the yellow box. An additional 482 in total beyond the proposal I went through gets us to the blue box as far as towns' assessments. And again, Newbury ends up with the largest increase regardless, based on predominantly the minimum local contribution shift. We just did a lot of talking. I'd like to blame it on Kyle, but team effort. We're both, yeah.
That was the 10 to 15-minute version.
Yeah. It's important stuff.
So the yellow and blue boxes are just based on theoretical reductions to get to those rounded numbers of 2.25 and 2 million.
Correct.
You're not contemplating or not proposing any additional cuts at this time?
We are doing lots of work. There has
No, but
been
there's
nothing
no
attached.
specifics behind any of
There
this.
is no.
Not at all.
The proposal as you have it
Yeah.
is the green with those reductions.
I got it.
Even those, there could be some of those reductions that would change by the time we get to March. So the goal tonight was hear from the towns, and then the very question you asked is the discussions that start next week of what is the target and how do we get to that target?
Are those meetings on Wednesday open to the towns? Can we make?
They're public meetings. They're
School
public.
committee meetings.
The school committee
School
meetings.
committee.
So they're streamed?
You're welcome anytime.
Yes.
They're not, are you asking, are they a discussion? They're not a
Yeah.
public discussion, no. They're a regular
Okay.
school committee. They're not a
Oh.
workshop.
But there's a
There'd
5-minute
be like a
public comment
3
period.
There's a public comment period,
Yeah.
At the beginning of it's a regular meeting,
Yeah,
so open with a public
About
comment.
3 minutes.
Yes.
Be concise.
You can say a lot in 3 minutes.
So I just want to be clear, Brian. So I was just talking with Ronnie. So green is if we say ebb tide. We just stay the course. Yellow and blue is more cuts to the
Green-
school system.
Green
addition
is
to
those
what you've
cuts
already-
that he already put together.
So we really don't want to see yellow and blue come to fruition. That means we're taking away from our school even more.
Yes.
So yes, green is with the 866,000 of reductions that I outlined to you. Or those could change, right? We could say we're not going to do, and that's the committee's prerogative over the coming weeks to say, we don't want to cut, whatever, a sixth grade teacher, find another $100,000. But that green box assumes an $866,000 reduction in services and staffing, yes.
So basically, us 3 towns have to talk to ourselves and our leaders and say, do we want a strong school system or not? That's pretty much what you're telling us.
Yes.
Do we want to lose home values because our school system is poor? Do we want, I know we all have to answer to the people and do our best financially, but we got to be careful of our school system too at the same time.
We're always walking that tightrope.
Well, we all work on that tight rope, but I know we just went through all this with Whittier, but I guess, us elected officials have to go to our townspeople and tell them the truth. Do you want a strong school system, or do you want to dismantle it? Because this is what this is telling me, that, that's just, it's a shame. We got to find a way. And if us 3 towns have to work together and find a way, that's what we're going to have to do. But to me, I'm already concerned about how much cuts you're cutting. Look at the class sizes. How are we teaching our kids? So I just want, I'm talking to my peers. This is where we're at. Do we want smart kids or do we want uneducated kids? So we have to go to our people and tell them the truth. That's just, it's eye-opening. It truly is. And I know we've all had the debate with Woody, a lot of tension came up, but, do we want a strong school system is what we all have to ask ourselves and go talk to the people.
I agree with you. I also think that, from my perspective, we have to have strong fire and police departments as well.
I 100% agree with you. That's why we have to go talk to people. Nobody wants to pay more. I get it. But do we want to cut our fire? Do we want to cut our police? Do we want to cut our school? At the end of the day, the only way to fix it is pay more money. As long as we ask our fire, our police, our managers, our school, do your best. Don't make it to where it's a failing system. Do your best. And we have to rely on you guys to do your best. And then
In our particular town, we don't have any fire coverage after 6 o'clock at night, so we have nowhere to cut at night. We have nobody 6 PM to 6
I
AM.
get that, but do you want to?
We got 2 cops.
Do you
on
want to
shift.
destroy the school system?
Of course not.
So
But I also have to take care of these kids when they're out of school, too.
I get that.
And
We have our own problems in Salisbury too. So, each town, we all have our unique issues. But, I can tell you I'll never advocate to dismantle Triton.
Or decrease services, not
No,
dismantle, but decrease services.
We're not asking to dismantle
Well,
Triton or any other school. What we're asking is to be smart and make informed decisions.
I think we have a lot of incompetent people working for the school system. We elect people who are very intelligent people. I think they are doing their best. I don't think we need to second guess them 24/7 on their budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, competent, not incompetent, sorry.
We knew what you meant.
You guys know what I meant.
I did some logical deductions
Yeah.
based on the comments. And
No, it's just,
It took me a second.
I know it's emotional.
I accepted it as is.
I did.
Very actually.
No,
Like Chandler.
I understand. I know, I understand the fire, because trust me, we have an ambulance problem. We had our firefighters throwing one of our patients on the truck because no ambulance ever came. So we have our own problems. Each town has that problem. But, I mean, I just don't know how bad we want to cut the school system too at the same time.
One thing is, after working with a regional school and seeing how transparent, when I look back, we got our first building outline, what, in '21 for the new school or what, I mean, so transparency of the budget is pretty outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go back and forth, you know, and the job that you guys did on bringing the building proposal to us, after just going through Whittier's, was outstanding.
Yeah.
So it's our job to go back and forth like we always do.
Yeah.
I think we all, hey, I was a teacher and I understand the cost of running a town to a point. So we just do the best we can and look to informed and smart decisions across the board.
I will say too, as we're continuing through this process, there are, as we continue to talk internally, we continue to look at the reductions we've proposed. We're having conversations weekly heretofore with the school committee. A reminder that the tentative budget that we voted on the 13th is the high water mark. We promised you it would never go up from there. We will know medical by that point. We can remain hopeful that that number will be some savings. And so certainly we would, be doing some trading and realizing those savings. So, there are some things that that's pretty much it, that could change in a positive direction, right? Nothing else we're waiting for.
Right, circuit breaker reimbursement on transportation, but that's about it.
Yeah. So our revenues, we've aggressively made assumptions, even in the current year, so we can't adjust those. But we are just to note that we are continuing to have those discussions with the committee, having discussions about what reductions would be appropriate based on the number where we need to land, and continue to look at kind of operational shifts we can make and responsibilities and consolidating, so that it is, right? So I mean, my greatest fear, and I would welcome anyone that has a question about our budget, the greatest fear is people, you say you feel like you have people who are competent running the district, and then people find out that we're doing something differently. We're just not. So I would welcome people, if you have questions about these budget drivers in the costs. There is nothing hidden. We report this stuff out. We just did it today.
We'll come to you anyway.
Yeah. So I would just encourage people, whether it's this group or members of the community that have concerns about the numbers.
I mean, it's funny, I look at, with the wisdom of our governor and the MBTA, planning for multifamily lot developments within our towns, and our budget is totally on the back of homeowners. We don't have a real commercial component. So, I mean, I think we just rezoned, 140 acres for multifamily housing. So if that gets built out, it'll be interesting to see in all our towns how many more students that puts into our school systems.
But I will say,
Because
Jeff,
multifamily will not pay for them.
but I will say that the research shows those dense apartments are exactly why Salisbury didn't go up. Condos and apartments tend to not have young children.
Which would be nice.
Yeah, they tend to be younger. No, but they tend to be either younger.
We like the kids.
I was putting in my mind, why did Salisbury get out? So,
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of research that shows us that the increased density is usually younger first job type of, younger kids.
I mean, if they're
I say
affordable,
kids,
it
but
would be
20 and
nice, but
30.
only 10% is going to be affordable.
Only, yeah, affordable isn't.
That makes
well,
no sense.
Just,
Yeah, but what's affordable, Jeff?
yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
But or retired people. So that's what MBTA really is focused more on. You know what brings more
see what
kids?
happens.
You know what brings more kids? $1 million homes, like Raleigh just had those. That's what brings more kids.
Yes, it does.
So.
A lot of them.
Not the multifamily dense thing, apartments. It's those, what did you guys have, 44 houses, $1 million, something like that? That brought more families to you guys than our condos that we have.
Thanks, that's good. I kind of wait and see if that'll hold true in Newbury when we get a developer building $1.9 million multifamily condos. We'll see what that,
Yeah.
we'll see what goes in them.
They tend to be 2 to 3 bedroom there.
So I'm hearing, obviously, increasing costs are a concern about making further cuts to the district. So
Find that middle ground, Brian.
So where are you?
I have a question.
the 7, all right,
There-
solved.
Do you still have 2 assistant principals at the high school or 1?
There are currently 2 assistant principals at the high school. Yep. Right, we've had conversations about administrators.
But this all circles back to the state mandates and.
Yes, I would welcome anyone who would like to take a tour of the high school. Overall population is reduced. It is challenging to keep kids engaged in school, and this is not a Triton thing. This is not a public school thing. It's a private school thing. It's just we've rewired what to expect. And so whether it be educator evaluation system or all the other responsibilities, it's something obviously we have to keep talking about, and we have, but it is concerning, yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Does anyone have any more?
Sorry, we were just looking at strangers coming into our town hall, so we're just like. Yeah.
Well, we like the kids.
Well, I'm watching
Don't let him get
Caitlin's
into
kids.
Jeff. He doesn't like kids.
I really appreciate
She's good. They're doing an awesome job.
I've been
Caitlin.
keeping an eye on them, too.
And we're very well behaved.
Very well behaved, I was going to say.
I want to thank all of you for coming here, because these conversations are important for your towns and for the schools. And I appreciate everybody that's here. I know this is going to be a hard budget year, and we all got to come together to see how we can work together to make sure the towns and the students of our school are taken care of. Again, you can always call Brian, Kyle, and our...
Next week.
It's a month. We got time.
No, we got his home phone number. We'll call him.
If you want, I can go.
It's on the website. Is this particular document?
Yeah, it all is.
It
So
is.
that
Okay.
is, we need to get up the documents, these documents from last night that have been edited, we'll get those up tomorrow. Yep.
Thank you.
No, Brian, if you want, I can bring a dump truck over and park behind Kyle so he can't leave. He won't get around it.
Meeting's not adjourned.
I got it.
So
Is
you
this your
can,
last meeting, Kyle?
We have one in 2 weeks, so I'll be here for that.
Oh, okay.
Sad to see you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all you did for Triton, so.
He's not leaving yet. Stop talking about it. He's another 2 weeks. You'll see him in
Again.
2 weeks.
I can bring a fork truck too, I can take him right up off the ground.
have any questions?
Working with you all.
Linda's trying to get it.
Let's adjourn this meeting. If anybody has any questions, concerns, myself, Kyle, Narissa, because you know she's our number person over there. I want to appreciate everything. As I always say, it takes a village to do what we all do, and I don't think we need a motion to adjourn, but have a nice evening.
Thank you.
The next meeting
2 weeks from tonight?
It's February 9th at Newbury.
It's basketball right now?
8th,
Oh, my
sorry.
daughter was like, she has a